Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Fantasy Hockey Picks and Bets show. I am Matt Moody, joined by DJ Mitchell, and we are here for the January 14th, Thursday NHL Daily Show. DJ, how you doing? Wednesday was opening night. How did it go for you? And, are you glad hockey's back?
Oh, couldn't be happier. Hockey's back. I'm wearing the great one, the Wayne Gretzky jersey. I'll probably have a different jersey on every single episode. So if you're watching live, you will see me go through my collection of jerseys, which is only going to be growing. But I couldn't be happier. The Buffalo Sabres are back tonight. Can't wait to watch them hopefully not break my heart this season. But we're here to talk about all-time games. Before we get started, though, I want to mention Fade the Noise, FTN. You're going to want to get in on that. You use the code MAYO if you want to get all of your action. You want to get all encompassing, all fantasy sports with this network. It's a great one to get involved in. We also, if you can't get enough of us, if you want more daily fantasy hockey, Morning Skate podcast, check us out. We've gotten a ton of followers. We're grateful for every one of you. Please let us know what you like, what you don't like. We got a lot of new users. So give us feedback. That's a gift and we want more of it. And night one, it's going well. I had some Philadelphia 2, which worked out really well. That late goal from Toronto and overtime saved a couple of those lineups. But we're not here to go over. We're not going to talk about our if we won or lost. We're not taking down 50K. I think I'll have some good ones. We got to talk about what happened tonight. The big news. Matt, what am I talking about? We had to pause the other podcast because of what news again?
Yeah, so on Wednesday night, we ran into a situation where 20 minutes before puck drop in the last game of the night, the St. Louis Blues confirmed that Mike Hoffman would miss due to work visa issues. And this was something that wasn't planned for. If you were, playing DFS, Mike Hoffman was very popular around the industry, and it came out of nowhere. So it just sort of goes to show, there is an edge in DFS, when you're paying attention and staying on top of things. I'm sure plenty of people missed it. I haven't gone through my contest quite yet to see just how many that is. But a lot of people I've seen on Twitter complaining about it. So just one of those things that you think, what's the edge in DFS these days? And I think the NHL is a great place for that. Especially in Showdown, the 10:30 Showdown slate. I believe I saw Mike Hoffman upwards of 10% owned on that slate. So they're paying the rake for you. Just something to take away from this Wednesday night slate. It was a nice appetizer, 5 games spread throughout 5:30 to just about 1 a.m. on the East Coast. And, we go right into 10 games here on Thursday. Only one team, or I guess one game on a back-to-back, which is Vancouver and Edmonton. You mentioned Fade the Noise. Just go to ftndaily.com for the daily fantasy stuff, or you can go to FTN betting for the betting side of it. Just a lot of stuff there. Use the code Mayo, and we can get right into it. So DJ, what's the first game we have to talk about here on Thursday?
All right, so we have the Washington Capitals against the Buffalo Sabres. Even though we're Sabres fans, we're definitely not homers, and that probably will come out in the exact opposite sense of what you normally expect from a podcast host talking about their favorite team. The Sabres have broken us beyond repair. So the first game we're going to get to is Washington, Buffalo, 7 p.m. in downtown Buffalo. So this game, obviously, it's stars and scrubs for sure. You got your Jack Eichel, your Ovechkin, Taylor Hall, that way up there, John Carlson, and then you're going to find some cheaper guys that might fit in. So I'm just going to quickly go through. We're not going to go every single line, everything, but it's projected that Jack Eichel will play with Taylor Hall and Tage Thompson on the first line. Thompson not on the first power play, definitely hurts his value, but he's 3,200. So if you 3,100 on DraftKings. So if you really like that line, it's worth looking into. Victor Olofsson, 4,500, but he's not currently slotted on the first line. With Washington, I think it's a lot easier. They kind of run the same units, but Matt, I'll toss it to you for them.
Yeah, so I was actually really surprised to see the line on this game. It looks like the Sabres are about plus 115. When you looked at the preseason odds, you saw the Capitals right up there among the top 4 in the East Division, and the Sabres, toward the basement. So this is a really early spot where if you think that the Capitals are one of those elite teams, you can get them at minus 134. That honestly seems like a pretty good number. So, that sort of jumped out to me right off the bat. But on the Washington side, from the daily fantasy side of things, the entire offense runs to Mr. Alex Ovechkin. You're going to pay for him, but there is simply nobody like him in the league, and definitely nobody like him on the slate, because I think the closest thing to him might be Austin Matthews, just in terms of shot dominance and such an elite shooter. So I really like Alex Ovechkin here to score a goal in your DFS lineups. Basically, give me all of the Alex Ovechkin on this slate.
Yeah, and one thing, just to kind of give a little bit of a shout out to our podcast, we did do a tips and notes kind of podcast for all daily fantasy hockey. So if you're brand new, definitely go check that out. Morning Skate Podcast. You can go to our Twitter, go through either of us to find it really quickly. The one thing that we kind of talk about a lot is core plays and kind of how you can construct a lineup by having your core plays and then finding the cheaper guys to mix in with it. Ovechkin, definitely a core play tonight. He's a core play every single night, though. So we don't need to go into great detail there. I agree with you fully on the money line. Is there any last player, maybe one cheap guy in this game that you're really high on? I mentioned Tage Thompson. He might not be the sexiest of plays without that power play one, but is there any really cheap guys you want to get to here? Or
so on Tage Thompson, he should be getting second power play time. And, while it's not perfect, I do think that really puts him in play at his bargain bin price. We've seen in the past, his previous stint in St. Louis. We've even seen it in the AHL. Like, he's going to shoot the puck when he gets the chance. And that's really what you're looking for in DFS. So I think he's in a pretty good spot here, regardless of not quite having that top tier power play usage. So, right. We can go over to the next game. No particular order. We're just going in mostly time order here. So Boston taking on the Devils. Boston is minus 175 here. Definitely a pretty significant favorite. Key news here is that they will have Brad Marchand. I know there was some question earlier in the week. He missed some practices. It sounds like he's good to go. And joining him on the first line will be Patrice Bergeron and Jack Studnicka. From a DFS perspective, that's awfully interesting. So I'll throw this over to you, DJ. How do you feel about this game in general, and any Bruins that you might like from a DFS perspective?
I think there's a lot of value in Boston, actually, which is really strange to say. Normally, we're always kind of the star approach with that top line or nothing. But in this game, their power play one actually works out pretty nicely. Bergeron, Marchand, obviously, making their way onto that first unit with Krejci, Coyle. Krejci coming in at 4,600, Coyle coming in at 4,100 on DraftKings, both center eligible, with the defenseman, as I think you may have mentioned on the first show, Matt Grzelcyk getting the nod at 3,300 on the first unit. So if you're stacking up Boston, Grzelcyk makes a ton of sense. He's not a great rate player. He's not terrible either, though. So I think it's incredibly cheap for him. There's a few defensemen at this price on DraftKings that are just too cheap. And I think it correlates pretty well over on FanDuel, too, if you play over there. So I definitely like this cheap Boston action. I do think if you're running enough lineups, you're going to want to get Marchand, Grzelcyk, and Bergeron in a lineup for sure. Anyone over on the Devils side that interests you? They're unbelievably cheap.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that Jack Hughes, 3,600, I believe, is his price here. And he is just, he oozes talent. And it's just a matter of, is this the year he sort of breaks through his sophomore season? He had a really tough go of it last year, but you saw the tools, you saw the skill. So he's really a guy that I think, you can play in multiple slates to begin the season when he's let's call it 4,500. And if you're right on him sort of taking that next leap into being a star player, that's really a guy who I think you could sort of take that speculative play for. And I will just echo your thoughts, especially on the David Krejci end of things. I think he's the main benefactor of Pastrnak being out to begin the season. Krejci in the bubble without Pasta did play in that, call it the OV spot, or where Pastrnak played, basically taking one-timers. And I think Grzelcyk setting him up, he should have a pretty nice night here. Inexpensive against a really poor Devils team.
Sure. I'm not really too interested in the money lines. I think if anything, I would take Boston pretty easily. Minus 175 isn't terrible. The over under 5.5, I think that's right. It could be one bounce away from 6. So I'm probably not going to look at that as something I want to bet on. Is there anything on the money lines before we get over to the Islanders Rangers?
I got nothing.
All right, let's get right over then to the Islanders Rangers. The first game for Lafreniere. The big thing with the Rangers, I'll just start with them, I guess, is that Zibanejad, who will play, he's really expensive, did have some COVID issues, so he wasn't with them for all practices. So it's a little bit of a concern. And at 8,400, I'm not buying it. He's not playing with Panarin at this point, unless if something changes. So it's really hard to get that top end stack option with him. I'm a little bit more interested in Panarin if I'm playing anything here, but overall, I'm not that interested in this game. The 6 over under feels like you go over on it. I feel pretty decent about that. But overall, I'm not looking to spend way up on Rangers. I'm also not looking to spend up on Islanders with Brock Nielsen at 4,600. I just feel like this game has some mispricing on DraftKings. There's not a ton of cheap guys either that I'm interested in. So this mainly is a fade for me. I might just fully on fade this game from my consideration. There's no one that really reaches out to me and grabs my attention. So I'll send it to you. If you have anything of interest here, then I'll let you take the floor.
Yeah. So, early in the season, I feel like a lot of the conventional wisdom is to just sort of, think over on basically anything. And, that certainly could be the case. But I think that a game with the Islanders, maybe sneaky decent defensively Rangers team, like Adam Fox was an absolute stud last year, just from an on ice perspective. Jacob Trouba, a fine player. Tony DeAngelo, when he's on the ice, yeah, he makes things happen. And he might not be the best in his own end, but I don't think he's a terrible third line, sort of defenseman. So I feel like the Rangers might be getting a little bit overplayed as this offensive dynamo that'll really light it up at both ends of the rink. And you certainly aren't getting that with the Islanders. If they could win every game 1-0, they would sign up for that in a heartbeat. I mean, heck, if they were to lose every game 2-1 in overtime, I think they would sign up for that too. So I think the under here is a really interesting one. And I did not really come into the season expecting to, like unders to start the year. But this game in particular just sort of has the smell of, this sort of grinded out, under. But for that reason, I don't really have a whole lot on the DFS side of it either. Like you mentioned, Zibanejad, I just think he's prohibitively priced, and there's not really a whole lot of other pieces that I like from either side of this game. So maybe consider Shesterkin as well in that. So,
and one note really quick, because, I think both of us just kind of said, Zibanejad's a bit priced too high. I think a lot of people are going to feel the same way. But on a 10-game slate, I never really worry about ownership as a big issue. If you have 10 games, all these centers, is Zibanejad going to go under maybe what his normal ownership is? Yeah, but it's not going to be by enough for me to really need to try to do that to get contrarian. Is there anything you want to mention about that kind of strategy, or just move right over? Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many players that you're not likely to see ownership condense unless you're playing in really high stakes, type contests where a lot of people sort of have a similar approach. But in these large, GPPs with 10, 20, 50K to first, you're not too likely to see ownership condense on any one spot to where it's super necessary to quote unquote pay up to be contrarian, just because almost everyone gives you a unique sort of lineup build. So getting to the next game, we have these, I think, tied for the largest favorite of the night, Carolina heading into Detroit as a minus 200 favorite here. Obviously, Detroit being the league's worst team last year. This game is also very interesting in that it's the only one on the slate with a 6.5 total. So DJ, what are your thoughts here? And does Carolina sort of merit this mega implied team total that they are currently being listed at?
Yeah, I definitely think they do. I talked about, I wouldn't even mind going with 4 Carolina Hurricanes. If you make enough lineups, I wouldn't mind jamming that in, getting a lot of that first power play. Dougie Hamilton is the only top tier defenseman I'm heavy on. I think the mid tier on defense on DraftKings is so interesting that I'm just not going to spend up. On FanDuel, Dougie Hamilton, to me, is almost a lock. He's so incredibly cheap. So depending on what site you're playing on, 50, 100 for Dougie on FanDuel is just egregious. So I'm definitely interested here. It's not, again, you talked about prohibitive pricing. Like none of these guys are. The most expensive Aho at 7,100 isn't bad. You can even get guys like Trocheck at 4K who are projected to be on the top power play. He's a bit of a solo guy, but if you get, go with Turbo, Hamilton, Aho, and just throw in Trocheck, if we get confirmation he's on the first power play, I think you're sitting pretty. I don't hate the idea of playing Detroit Red Wing just because we know exactly where these guys are going to be. Larkin and Mantha just getting such massive roles, but I'm not forcing it because I think Carolina's a good enough defensive team that they'll be able to keep them at bay. So I'm probably not going to play a ton of Red Wings, but maybe mixing in a couple. As far as cheap guys in this game, Nino Niederreiter, 3,700. I think he's always an option when you're stacking. He might not see the power play one role. We're still waiting on confirmation. Last night, we had anything. It didn't seem like he was going to be there, but we'll find out. Matt, anything you want to mention other than that for this game?
I'll just add on to the Dougie Hamilton discussion, like the importance of sort of looking at where you're playing site-wise. So on DraftKings, as you mentioned, he's 7,000, the second highest priced defenseman next to Brent Burns. I think he is at let me just pull 7,700 for Brent Burns, 6,900 for Carlson, 6,700 for Yossi, 7K for Dougie. Here are the names on FanDuel who Dougie Hamilton, 5,800, Zach Werenski, 5,800 on DraftKings. Zach Werenski is 4,800. And you can go down the list here on FanDuel, like the names that he's priced Dougie, around. It's just such a massive difference.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And that's why I think I don't always play on both sites, but I think early in the season, there's going to be a lot of price variation. And even if you're not going to play on FanDuel or on DraftKings, if you really prefer one, just give it a look, kind of see what the other sites are saying. I mean, there's a lot of money and algorithms that go into this. They're not stupid. So check it out, see what you could get. We'll go over one guy that's 5,300 on FanDuel and 3,300 on DraftKings in a little bit here when we get to it. So you see what I'm saying, though. Look over these prices. It's another great strategy to see what's going on both sites and where you can get some advantage. So getting to the next game, unless if there's anything you want to add, Columbus and Nashville, ahead. Are you ready? Yeah, so Columbus and Nashville, definitely a game that has, I would say, not the most value on the slate, but the most expensive forward, Forsberg at 6K. Then after that, it gets down to 5,100 with Bjorkstrand. So there's a ton of value here. I do think this game projects to be a lower scoring one. It's not going to be heavily stacked, I think for good reason. But Bjorkstrand at 5,100, I think, is a pretty solid play just to kind of center around one of these, cheaper defensemen for Columbus. Seth Jones, we remember in the playoffs playing about 500 minutes a night. They definitely are going to rely on him. And, he's going to play a ton of minutes. With Bjorkstrand, 52, 5,100. That's, I think, a great value. On the Nashville side, I don't know if I love Nashville here, but again, they're cheap enough. I'm just going to send it to you. Is there one guy or two guys on Nashville that you're considering, or is this game more of a dud for you? Like I think it will be. Yeah,
so, one spot worth monitoring is Victor Arvidsson, missed on Tuesday. So if he is... he missed practice on Wednesday. Sorry, he did practice Tuesday. If that was something, more severe than just a maintenance day, we could see some supreme value, maybe by the name of, Eli Tolvanen or something else, going on in Nashville. But there could be a large vacuum of, just opportunity up for grabs, much like we saw with Vancouver on Wednesday with JT Miller missing, and Vancouver on Thursday also with JT Miller still missing. So that's just one area worth checking in on throughout the day on Thursday. But otherwise, I think this is right. It's probably the least, pacey game. The over-under is 5.5 with the under favored. So if you want to bet on goalies being goalies and just take the over here, you're basically getting even odds on there being 6 goals. I don't hate that, especially when you have guys like Forsberg and Bjorkstrand who can beat a goalie from absolutely anywhere. So I like that, but nothing too crazy. The one narrative worth tracking, James Harden finally worked his way into a trade out of Houston. Maybe Pierre-Luc Dubois goes into, FU mode and tries to do the same for himself. So, that's really the best you've got.
Great. Okay, well, let's get over to a game that I think we both have a lot more interest in this Calgary Winnipeg game. It feels like the over under on this is at 5.5, just because of the goaltending matchup, which we just saw Carey Price and Frederick Anderson get shelled for 11 goal game. I'm not that interested early on in the season of buying in on any goalie in particular. Both defenses, I think Calgary is very good. Winnipeg's is not that great. I'm definitely interested in both sides of this game. I'm interested in the over as well. I wouldn't really care on the money line. I think it's if you really like a strong feeling on it, go for it. But there's supreme value in guys like Patrick Laine, Blake Wheeler. Ehlers would be, but he missed practice when you're listening to this yesterday with COVID protocol related thing. Paul Maurice did not rule him out of the game, so definitely keep an eye on that. But at 5,400, he was slotted in on that first line with another supreme value here, Scheifele at 5,800. I don't know if we ever saw him that cheap last year. So there's a ton of value over on Winnipeg, and right away with Calgary as well. Monahan 57, Lindholm, who is going to be playing with the Chuck, 5,300. So Monahan, Gaudreau, however you want to put that together. Supreme value here. Is there one spot in particular you're looking to capitalize with that?
I mean, look, here's the thing. Calgary and Winnipeg combined for one good real-life defenseman in Mark Giordano, who is really old. I mean, you're
Rasmus Anderson, don't do it.
Okay, but is he really capable of keeping this game? I mean, this game should not be a 5.5. And I think that this is one of the best bets on the board. Get on it before it gets to a 6. I imagine it'll close at 6. So yeah, I'm not buying that Markstrom's going to come in and save the Flames. And I'm also not buying that, Hellebuck can have a Vezina caliber season and drag this team, within earshot of the playoffs. Like Winnipeg was really bad last year and they played a lot of fun games that Hellebuck just bailed them out in. So I think this one is just a really, really fun one. And the top line in Winnipeg is where I'm mostly focusing, a lot like you said. So
it's almost a dead flip on FanDuel. I'm just going to mention Kyle Connor, almost a full 900 cheaper than Laine on FanDuel, while on DraftKings, 7K Connor, 5,600 Laine. It's just weird how these sites work. I know the scoring can be a touch different, but man, definitely flip the narrative on the other site for sure. But is there anything else you want to mention here? Are there any cheap guys that you want to mention? I know Dylan Dubé is playing with one of the top lines there. Stuff like, is there any of those guys that are interesting to you? Or
yeah, I mean, you mentioned Rasmus Anderson, and I'm a longtime fanboy. He should get first dibs at the first power play this season. He's in play. He's in play. He didn't show great last year. He got some opportunities, and he didn't put up great rate stats or anything. But the price, should be there, workable for him. But in general, I just think, getting pieces to this game and the over are just my favorite two ways to approach it, because
I think there'll be a coming out party for Anderson, though. I really like that call, and we should just get on it early. I mean, there's always defensemen, players in general that start the year super cheap and really, really, really under-owned that we want to get on. If we get any clarification on that top unit and Anderson start to take over, jump on it early and just rake in the money.
Speaking of raking the money, we go over to San Jose and Arizona. There are a number of ways I could go with this. I will not mention Evander Kane. Instead, I will go with if you've played Brent Burns over the last 5 years, besides last year, you've been raking in money. Yeah, sorry for the low blow there, Evander. You're number one in my heart.
He's listening for sure. He's definitely listening.
Yeah, I love that guy. He's so much fun to watch play hockey. So I hope he stays on the ice, selfishly. So anyway, looking at this game, it looks like another snoozer in Vegas. I guess based on the odds, and I don't really see too much to like here. As we mentioned, Brent Burns seems like he's priced as if he's the old Brent Burns, and frankly, that's just no guarantee. I'm personally sort of betting on a bounce back, but I am not betting on playing him at 7,700 in a snoozer type of a matchup. So from a DFS perspective, this game is pretty much dead to me. But DJ, any thoughts on sort of the other context around this game or any other plays?
I mean, I think that there's enough value in San Jose where I could consider it. I mean, Carlson, I like him a lot more than Brent Burns, price considered. I'm not paying 7,700 for Burns in this matchup. But I think with San Jose, what I mentioned on the other show, they are still in win now mode, even though almost everyone's writing them off. So I think they're still going to be playing those top two lines a very good amount, and the minutes are going to be high. We know where it's coming from with all of these guys. There are a couple, I guess, supreme values. At minimum salary, I'm trying to actually find him. John Leonard. He was a guy that led college hockey in points, I believe, last year. Is that ringing
I
a
think he led
bell?
it in goal scoring, but it could
In
have been
goal
both.
scoring. It was just goal. I just want to make sure. Okay. In goals, he's power play 2,700. I think you'll see a good amount of minutes. I actually believe in him as a guy that at minimum salary or right around there that could get the job done. Ryan Donato, also minimum salary, is kind of slotted in a bad spot in the third or fourth line. So minutes might not be there, but second power play, he should be the trigger guy there. But guys at center, Couture, Hurdle, below 6K. I think that's fair enough value. But overall, this game, I'm just trying to get a couple pieces maybe, and then moving on. Not much on Arizona, maybe Connor Garland. But other than that, I'm probably content to move over to Vancouver and Edmonton.
Yeah, so we don't have a whole lot to work with from the Vancouver Edmonton game, but I'm sure there will be some really good sort of insights to take away from it. It looks like Yamamoto scored from Draisaitl, so that line, McDavid's not quite yet playing with Draisaitl. It could get there, we'll see. But just in general, this game should be a fun one, regardless of whether it plays out on Wednesday night. Just on paper, these two teams, basically like all of the Canadian teams, seem much weaker defensively than they are strong offensively. So it's just like there's going to be a lot of, I think, mistakes and a lot of sort of opportunity. As we alluded to, there's a ton of opportunity, especially in Vancouver, due to the absence of JT Miller. So, DJ, do you want to take us through some of the ramifications of Miller's extended COVID absence from the sound of things?
At this point, we have Niles Hoglander, who was mentioned on the last show. This is their only back-to-back, which we should mention. He was mentioned by the guys on the show for Wednesday. I mentioned him again. I mean, this guy has 6 skill. He is a goal scorer that has like multiple Michigan-style goals over in the Swedish league. He's a beast. Rookie, top power play, getting tons of opportunity there. We're gonna have to find out exactly the usage tomorrow, but that could be a premium spot to play. Just overall in this game, I like the over. I know it's a back-to-back. I think we kind of both feel the same way about this. These back-to-backs are not the same. This is a baseball series type of style. They don't go anywhere. They're not traveling from, Vancouver to Edmonton. They're already there. They're just going to go to their hotels, go to bed, get up and play tomorrow. So I'm not that concerned about it. I think if you like the over on this game the night before, where I think it was a half goal higher, I'd like it again, the same exact amount. The real supreme value on this game, again, I think is going to be Brock Besser, who was valued right before with JT Miller out. That does open maybe a little more ice time for Besser, maybe gives him a few more opportunities to shoot the puck. He's got a great shot. And then if you do stack up on Edmonton, if you really like McDavid or Draisaitl or both, for some reason, and I don't know what it is, and this was the guy I was alluding to earlier, at 3,300, Tyson Barrie, we're going to need to make sure that he's still power play 1 and getting that role. But 3,300 for Tyson Barrie, if he's getting a lot of usage with McDavid and Draisaitl, that price just doesn't make any sense. He was, I think 44 or 4,500. He just drops a full 1,100. It doesn't make any logical sense to me why DraftKings did that, but we might as well take advantage of it right here. Him and Grzelcyk are the supreme values at defense. And if you're stacking either Boston or Edmonton, you're going to want to maybe consider those guys. Is there anything else you want to mention on either side in this game? I think I covered a good bit there.
Yeah, no, I'll temper expectations for Barry just a touch because it does seem like he's going to be used in a third line type of role. So you might be stretching it if if you're projecting 17 minutes time on ice for Tyson Barry. I think I'm looking more to spend up rather than take that value myself, just to get, 24 minutes or so out of guys who I think have similar floors. I certainly I can't tell you why he is 1,100 less overnight. So let's move over to Anaheim, Vegas. Vegas, they are the largest favorite of the night, minus 215, but they're doing something that I don't think we have ever seen before in the NHL.
No.
They are going into this game with a plan to play 13 forwards and only 5 defensemen. Now, we've seen teams, go 11-7 and sort of rotate through their defensemen in that way, but we've never seen a team intentionally shorthand themselves, on defense. And of course, some of that makes sense because you bring in Alex Pietrangelo. He and Shea Theodore can easily play, half the night, and your team's in good shape. But that's a really interesting thing to think about. Maybe not quite so much from a betting perspective, because you can maybe make an argument that if their defense is too tired and this is sort of like maybe it's some sort of like conditioning exercise for the playoffs. I don't know. But certainly the creativity of Vegas here should be seen in DFS, where it just sort of makes these forwards a little bit more volatile, a little bit more risky, because their minutes, could disappear. Someone could step up onto their line and they could just ride the bench. We don't really know how they're going to handle it. And then also, obviously, the defenseman getting a ton of minutes. So here, my primary lean is to maybe consider like the Ducks puck line, just because maybe this game stays close. I'm sort of, a bit high on the Ducks myself coming into this season. And I think that that's, a reasonable thing to do given some of the uncertainty around Vegas. And then the second thing is to look really hard at Shea Theodore. And, if you project him to play the first power play, Shea Theodore should see, honest to goodness, 28 minutes or more in this game. So yeah. I know I covered a lot of it, Deej, but any other thoughts on this game?
Yeah, no. I think you really knocked it out of the park. That was exactly what I wanted to say, and I knew we both are on the same page with this game. It's a very unique setup that we've never seen before, and I totally agree. I think the one punt that I wanted to get to, and I've already said a couple really good defensive punts, but Shattenkirk or Fowler are going to find themselves probably on that first power play unit. I think it'll be Shattenkirk, 3,400 for Shattenkirk, 3,100 for Fowler. If you do find yourself, for whatever reason, it may be liking a couple of these Anaheim guys, supreme value there. So the correlation should find itself. I'm not very high on this game, other than maybe a couple Vegas guys like Pacioretty and Stone with one of those defensemen could find its way into my lineup. But overall, I think I kind of like the under in this game. It's just not really getting too high on it. But we can get over to the final game of the night, Minnesota at Los Angeles. Los Angeles, obviously a team that most people are counting out to start the year, and probably for good reason. Their highest DK player, Kopitar obviously at 6K, Doughty at 54, gets a lot cheaper. I don't see a ton of value here anyways, just because they're not that good. I think Minnesota has a lot more meat on the bone. And I kind of like Minnesota in this game, and probably, again, the under 5.5. I don't normally like to take those unders, especially early in the season, but I don't see this being a super high scoring game unless if Minnesota blows the doors off. So maybe if you take the Minnesota line, you just go over, because they probably just go nuclear on this very weak LA team. So is there any daily leans that you have in this game? And why is it Matt Dumba?
Yeah. Yeah. So in Minnesota, obviously you mentioned Matt Dumba. I think he's severely underpriced at 4,200
on both
here.
Sides.
Yes, on both sides. On DraftKings, he is 4,200. Yeah, and he's going to shoot. He's going to be featured on their power play. I think he's among the best defensive plays on this entire slate. But I also think that Minnesota has a couple of the best values as well. Their new first line looks like it will be Zach Parise with Kirill Kaprizov flanking Nick Bjugstad. And all of these guys are just wildly cheap. It really kind of boggles the mind how a guy like Kirill Kaprizov can have the success in a men's professional league in Russia, come over, be the Calder. I think he's the odds-on favorite as the season starts. It might be one of the Rangers guys, but I know Kaprizov closed
just a little below them. Yeah, we closed right near him.
He closed the gap, but you're talking, and he's 2,900. Like this guy has so much talent. I'm really excited to see what he can do in the NHL. And when DraftKings is basically begging you to play him, yeah, I'll take that any day of the week. And also in alignment with that, I just think Minnesota is a far superior team to the Kings. The fact that they're minus 125 is kind of a slap in the face. Like it's and even better, I think, might be this puck line. If you bet Minnesota to win by 2 goals or more, so minus 1.5 on the puck line, you can get 2-1 odds on that. So you just need to think 1/3 of the time Minnesota either wins by 2 or wins by 1 with a empty net goal toward the end of the game. Like I think that's a really good number. So I think I'll take that myself, and I'll also look really hard at Kaprizov as sort of like a main value point in this on this slate.
Yeah, I think he's one of my core players. Him and Ovechkin are two guys that, you put in your wing spots, opposite ends of the spectrum, but I think both have really, really, really high upside. So I'm all in on that. I love that Minnesota stack that you mentioned as one of my core stacks that I'm considering, one of my favorite cheap stacks of the night for sure. I think we mentioned enough stacks at this point, though. If you just want to get into a little bit, just a quick goalie talk. I know your least favorite position is definitely a goalie, but I know that people want to at least hear something about goalie before we move on. Unless there's anything you wanted to mention in the Minnesota LA game.
No, I mean, I'm just disappointed this is a video show because whenever I hear about goalies and like having to select a goalie, I just feel like the color drains from my face, and I'm just sort of staring at like this impossible math problem that I just cannot solve.
Really quickly before we do this, just we talked about this in our tips and other show, which we'll definitely link if anyone has interest. DM either of us, DM the Morning Skate podcast will get you that information. The one thing about goaltender, Matt, is a lot of people have different kind of ideas of how they want to attack a slate, a 10-game slate like this, and where goalie is going to fit in. Now, some people like to go against their goalie. I know you're not of that mindset. You can give a quick explanation of how you select a goalie when you're on a 10-game slate.
Sure. So, the number one thing that people, they might get this from soccer because soccer has a very similar element of, guys who see a lot of shots on goal, the players going against that goalie will get a lot of points for the shots and the goalie will get a lot of points for the saves. That doesn't really hold true in hockey, so to speak. You'll see it from time to time, take down a big GPP and people go, oh, look at this guy. He played, 4 Dallas Stars against the Winnipeg goalie. Well, not this year, but I believe that happened last year at one point. And it just doesn't really work like that. It's much more dependent on, the sort of win bonus and you're just not as likely to win when your stack's giving, not giving you sort of the goals needed for their team to win. So I prefer to correlate with my line stacks. Part of the reason being something called score effects, which is something that's very well, well established in hockey is, late in games when teams are leading, they tend to give up a lot more shots and those shots tend to be of less danger. Meaning that your goalie gets to make easy saves and he gets to win if your stack does well. And of course, it doesn't always work like that, but that's what I try to do. And then if I can't correlate my goalie, I always try and go cheap. You can usually find cheap goalies that, have decent win odds. And I prefer to use that money to spend up on more sure forwards and defensemen to sort of get me more points in my lineup. So that's my goalie talk.
I think that's the perfect way to put it. That's why on this slate, I'm just going to take it from here quickly. That's why on this slate, I really like Cam Talbot. I think LA is going to be down. The concern obviously is LA going to get enough shots on net. But Minnesota is already very good at keeping shots to the outside. So if LA is going to have a chance in this game, you're really going to be firing the puck as much as possible. If that's happening, I think Cam Talbot's in an elite spot at 7,900. Play, Bukestad, Krill, Dumba, and Talbot really cheap. That'll help you get those top end players like Ovechkin and Eichel into your lineup. So that's one of my favorites. I think on the cheaper end, I like either one of these Columbus goaltenders. I think it could be Korpisalo or Merzlikins. We're not 100%. Either one of those is fine by me. Is there anyone that you want to mention in net as maybe like, hey, I like this stack, and with that stack, I think this goalie makes sense?
I think that the Sabres could make sense. We talked about at the beginning of the show how they're their money line is, it's not quite a pick 'em, but it's much closer than I think you would expect at first glance. Yet they're a home goalie priced at 7,400 here on DraftKings. I believe it'll be Ullmark in that, but that's a very easy pairing to go with your Eichel and Hall type stacks. But I think that Cam Talbot will be my most owned goalie, just to prognosticate ahead of time here on this Thursday slate. So let's do a couple of top DFS stacks and a top value, and then get on out of here. What do you say?
Perfect. First off, Niles Hoglander did score. So when you're listening to this, know that he's probably going to be cemented in that top power play unit. That seems to be pretty likely. So top stacks, I will go with, the Winnipeg one's too good to be true, I think. It's right in the middle tier. I hope I'm not stealing this from you, but I'm sure I am. I think at this point, I'm not expecting to see Ehlers play. They're hush-hush about it, but I think that's on purpose. So Scheifele, Line, and I definitely consider 51 Neil Pionk, although I'm not sure if I'm going to go with him on defense. The two-man stack's fine, or maybe even throw in Wheeler with it at 58.
All right. With all of the value that's, sort of apparent to us, it sure seems like this Vancouver Edmonton game might be a bit of a dud. I want to go right back to the well, and, Connor McDavid, one of the best players in the world. I think he might go on their own just because they're on a back-to-back, and you can get him with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. They're pretty expensive, but I think they're also among the top pairings on the slate. So you could play them with Tyson Barrie to open up some cap, or you could do something like Minnesota. There's a ton of ways to play these guys in lineups that make a lot of sense. So I think that Edmonton one is one of my favorite stacks here.
Yeah, I love that game stack, honestly. I think people are just going to see the back and just for some reason shy away from it. Like maybe it's because it's not new and people like new things. So I would use that big brain logic I just came up with. I will have a game stack with that for sure, with both sides. I think another one, Carolina, I said the 4-man stack. I'm sticking to it. Svechnikov, Teravainen, throw in Trocheck and throw in Hamilton. It's expensive, but you play that with a couple Minnesota guys, and maybe you could still get like Hoglander and another there on Winnipeg. On Vancouver, and maybe a Winnipeg guy. And I think that could all kind of work. Any last one for you?
Yeah. So this one I think will be more of like a large field GPPs, or even the late slate. If you're thinking multiple slates, these 10 gamers are great times to play multiple slates. And I'm thinking for like this late slate, this Anaheim Vegas game, there's a lot of uncertainty around the forwards in Vegas. It does sound like there's a lot of certainty though with the top players in Anaheim. And the top line right now should be Rickard Rakell, Adam Henrique, and Jacob Silfverberg. I think all of those guys, should see 20 plus minutes time on ice. They're all really good NHL players. There's not too many of those in the Anaheim roster, but all those guys are together. And if you're a little leery that this Vegas experiment could go wrong, how many experiments do go wrong in Vegas? I'm sure the number is pretty high. Getting Anaheim one at super duper low ownership, even on a smaller slate, I think is a really interesting, highly correlated stack with a lot of upside. So.
All right. I think, that'll probably pretty much do it for this show. I do want to mention one thing though, and I think we hinted at it. I'm not sure if you actually said the words though. So in every single daily fantasy sport, and hockey's included, you really want to make sure that the late game. So let's just say, for example, you are all in on Kirill Kaprizov. He should be your utility for sure. Like we said with Hoffman going out, if you had him in utility, you could have definitely factored in another guy like Sundqvist. You had a goal. So if you didn't have him in utility,
was Sundqvist the center? I was thinking like
he was a center.
Sorry.
Yeah, he was.
Right. Okay.
No, Vince. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, he was a center. So you would have missed out. Kyrou scored as well, ironically enough. But anyways, so you want to make sure you're doing that, and I think that does get overlooked, especially when you're making 10 lineups like me. I got as many as I could. Make sure you're doing that though. It doesn't matter if you love McDavid and Nugent Hopkins. You don't need to put Nugent Hopkins at wing. Put him at utility if you don't have any guys in the 10 o'clock games. It definitely gives you more options with COVID. Obviously Hoffman was out for a work visa, but COVID is going to come at players like out of absolute nowhere. And you're going to have 5 minutes to make a quick change. So have more options available. It's going to help you with all of your lineups. Maybe you can still get a correlating piece. And with that, is there anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, I mean, just in general, also late swap, keep your optionality open for these late games. By 10 o'clock, you should know how, 3, 4, 5 of these games went and how your stacks are doing. If you can sort of move things around to ensure that you're, not drawing dead when your chalk fails and you're playing more late chalk, get off that late chalk and play some other guys. We definitely don't see that enough in all sports, but I think the NHL in particular. So yeah, I think that will do it for this show here on the Mayo Media Network. Again, thank you to Fade the Noise for their kind sponsorship. Just go over there, use the code Mayo on their daily fantasy or their betting tools. I'm sure you won't regret it. And be sure to follow Pat on Twitter because he's just giving out $100. All you got to do is a couple, really minor things to support this show. And, DJ, I think you have the more specifics on it, but he's literally giving away $100. So just go do it.
Go to Apple Podcast, maybe any of the podcast forums. You leave a 5-star rating and a review, and you put your Twitter handle in there. That's it. You don't even have to put a nice comment, although some people put some very nice comments about us and others. We do appreciate that. Do it. It's really easy. And then, like I said before, I mentioned twice now, check us out at the Morning Skate podcast if you want more daily fantasy. There's definitely some repeats, so you're going to find some of that. Obviously, there's only so much we can talk about. And if you really, really, really like me and you want even more, if you love the Buffalo Sabres as much as I do, the Charging Buffalo, even if you just want to follow it for Buffalo news, if you have lists of reporters, try to get news out first. So at the Charging Buffalo is also a blog that I write for, do a little podcast work, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more involved as the Sabres push for a playoff spot and probably miss.
All right. So that will do it here. You can follow me on Twitter. I am at Fake Moods, and DJ is at DJ_Mitchell94. So with all that said, best of luck on your bets, best of luck on your DFS play, and let's just enjoy some hockey. So thank you for listening, and we will see you.